We thank him for coming out here this evening, also a Penn alum. So please help us welcome to the front of the room, Mayor Nutter.
What's the deal with the light? I feel like I should get ready to make a confession or something. I mean, assume the position. I mean, I can't see. Well, one, it's a good thing that I already know Mayor Franklin. Seriously, Suleiman, thank you very, very much. Our great chairman of the board of the African American Chamber of Commerce. Please recognize Suleiman Rahman. Yes. And the little bit that I can see, let me just kind of do this real quick. Maria, Cecilia, and Lolita, thank you all very, very much for your help and assistance. This first ever Penn Spectrum event, bringing together two critically important constituencies, African American alumni, as well as our LGBT community. Please give yourselves a big, big round of applause for making this happen. I thank our president, President Amy Gutmann. Thank you very, very much for your support for this event. Events like this, I think, help to demonstrate what Penn is about and what it can be, being forward-thinking, bringing together a variety of constituencies, and I wish that, again, these were some of the kinds of things that were taking place when I was here about 1 billion years ago. On the other hand, if it had existed back at the time, given, and some of you have probably heard this before, given the limited amount of time that I spent on campus, I probably would not have been able to take advantage of it anyway. There are a few folks in here who know what I was mostly doing when I was here at Penn, which was working at the Impulse Discotheque, playing records and not studying. So somehow, I mean, I did have good enough grades from high school to get in. I'm still not sure exactly how I got out of this place, but yeah, it's another story for another day. I could not be more excited, though, to have the opportunity, and I'm not going to read really kind of what was written, because I know this lady in a very different way. Plus, even if it were, and it is a really great speech, I can't see it anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I do see, before I introduce her, I see at least another young rising star in the political community. So all the way in the back, before he sits down, Penn alum, State Representative Kenyatta Johnson. Please recognize him. Penn alum are all over the place, all over the country, certainly all over the city, actively engaged in politics, government service, business, which is probably where I should have stayed before I lost my mind and went into this business, where you get a ton of complaints, make no money, and your parents wonder why in the world did they struggle so hard to send you to such a great place, from which you clearly demonstrate that you apparently didn't learn anything by going into this business in the first place. But again, that'll be another speech for another day. Mayor Franklin, I've said on a couple occasions, being mayor, I do get many, many opportunities to come to Penn and participate in a variety of events. And I now, my class year was last year, so I participated in some events then. I now literally have been on campus more as mayor than I was my entire 4 years here at the University of Pennsylvania. So it's always good to be back. It's good to see what it would have been like if I'd actually spent some time here. Yeah, if you're 19 years old working in a nightclub and going to econ class. I mean, you think about that. Econ, nightclub. Econ, nightclub. You know what I chose. But I've had a great role model and someone that I've been paying attention to before I became mayor. She's an alum of Penn. She's a sister of this great institution and this great city, and went south, became the first female mayor of a major city in the South. Worked her way up the ranks, and as many women do, unfortunately, spent a whole lot of time doing a whole lot of work for a whole bunch of guys, and then finally said, you know, I can actually do this myself, and got herself elected mayor of the city of Atlanta. 2 terms, did a tremendous job, and has, on a very, very personal level, has been a tremendous inspiration to me and many other mayors, whether they are, you know, tried and true veterans or as soon as I was elected, got involved with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and from time to time, when the, you know, things look dark and bleak and then the recession hit and all of us are getting hammered out of nowhere, but seemingly always at the most important moment, I'd get a text. Hang in there, you're doing the right thing. I'm watching what's going on up in Philly. Keep doing your thing. Shirley Franklin. A lot of times. And she and I and a bunch of others across the country, you know, Philadelphia, of course, we're so parochial at times, so insular, and, you know, many of us don't really go anywhere, and we don't care about other places. You know, this recession has actually hit everywhere. Philly is not the only city that's been impacted by the recession, and I was elected in November of 2007. The economists told us 9 months later that the recession started in December of 2007. So everywhere I've gone, in Philadelphia and across the country, I've said to folks, I want to be very clear that my election in November of 2007 had nothing to do with the international economic crisis that came a month later. I just want to declare that and make sure that everyone's clear about it. So it has hit Philly, Atlanta, Boston, New York, Baltimore, San Francisco, Chicago, you name a city, they're having trouble. Shirley Franklin, Mayor Shirley Franklin, took up that challenge, did what needed to be done, and we would talk from time to time, and she would tell me, yeah, they're upset with me now about X, Y, and Z, and yeah, they're upset with me now about this, that, and the other thing. But you do what you have to do. We don't have the luxury of doing what we want to do. And you stand tall and you do what is necessary to save and protect your city. That's what I'm trying to do here. That's what she did in Atlanta. And so it is of great, great pleasure and an incredible honor to be able to bring here at Penn our sister from Philadelphia, our Penn alumni, Mayor Shirley Franklin.
He's terrific. He's terrific. I've already told him I expect him to go home and get some sleep. You got a long day, right? You got a long day.
I'm going to be over here.
No, that's all right. I am delighted to be here. I grew up 18 blocks from here on Walnut Street, 54th and Walnut. Spent a lot of my childhood walking around these streets. Actually knew Sadie Alexander, who many of you know. Grew up in a time in Philadelphia in the 1950s when it wasn't really clear that major institutions and major colleges were really going to open up. Some of you know my dad was an attorney here. My mother was a teacher and an educator. So I spent all of my formative years in West Philadelphia. And I went to Girls High. I graduated in a class a long, long time ago, the 204th class. I tell folks that and they're like, ooh. I tell young people in colleges and high schools that I graduated from high school in 1963, and all of the fifth graders, they gasp. You know, because I'm older than their grandparents. But I am delighted to be here. Ryan, where are you? Ryan is here. She is a persistent lady. I don't know if she learned that in Atlanta from her parents or she learned it at Penn, but she would not give up when I kept saying, no, 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 I don't have to do this anymore. But Ryan was persistent, and I'm delighted to be here. Congratulations to the entire committee. And you've done a great job. And one of the most important things that you've done is if you have reached out to people of difference across a full spectrum and included them, and I suspect been an inspiration for many of them, to bring together networks from across the country of Penn alums. So that is a huge, huge accomplishment, and actually builds on the traditions of generations before, whether it's the Harlem Renaissance or whether it's fast forward to the Civil Rights Movement. You are actually, by doing that, putting a pin, P-I-N, on the map and saying the future requires all of us to know each other. The future requires us to know ourselves, and I understand there was a terrific program about knowing yourself. It is important to know yourself, to respect yourself, so that you are comfortable and confident to respect others. Now, some who have met me, like Allison and some others, have said to me, well, you speak your mind. I said, well, yes, I kind of do. But that does not mean that you're not respectful of other people. And I think the spectrum, as you've defined it, offers the opportunity for us to celebrate as people of color and people of different backgrounds in a very particular way that is important. And though Michael has said, and we do text, and he occasionally says, Shirley, I read something you did and you are crazy. They haven't run you out of Atlanta yet. I think it's really, really important for us, and he does really important things, and the only thing anyone wants him to do is what their concern is of the moment. But the real true greatness of Michael Nutter and people like him is that they put the moment is important, but it is not nearly as important as the future. And I am really clear that the hardest thing I did as mayor, the single hardest thing I did as mayor, was imagining those things that would matter 50 years from now. It is fairly easy to fill a pothole. It is fairly easy to balance a budget. It doesn't mean people like you when you do it. It is fairly easy to go out and start a new program. It is very hard to figure out what will matter 50 years from now. And I didn't come up with that myself. I'll give credit to two of my mentors, Andrew Young and Maynard Jackson, but most specifically, thank you. But most specifically, I give credit to Wellington Webb, who was the mayor of Denver in the 1990s. And he came to visit me, and he first said, Shirley, you'll never get elected the way you're going. The black preachers don't support you. He had a whole long list of things. And he said, furthermore, the hardest thing you're going to do is to figure out what matters 50 years from now. So as you are planning your work, I charge you to forget about the easy stuff. Frankly, anybody can do that. It is the hard things and those that will matter 50 years from now. University of Pennsylvania is such an example. It matters several hundred years later because people made a difference, created an institution. I mentioned that I knew Sadie Alexander. All of the things that happen with people of color over the years. Does that mean Penn is perfect? Absolutely not, which is why you're here. Your job, My job, as those who are living and breathing today, is to be sure that 50 years from now, Penn's mission has been defined as a mission of inclusion, with not just a few names on the list, but so many names that you can't print the program. So many names that you can't print the program. Now, how do you do that? I went to one of the sessions today, and it was very interesting on government and politics. And I listened with great interest in that session. And there was a lot of talk about how do you change an institution and whether there are any barriers in the institutions. And in fact, in that particular session, one or two people said, well, there are no barriers. Someone else said, yes, there are barriers. There was a difference of opinion as to whether there are barriers. But I challenge anyone here to raise your hand if you think there are no barriers. Barriers still exist, whether they affect us personally or not. 20 million Americans are unemployed or underemployed. 1 in 5 children, and in some communities 1 in 4 and 1 in 3 are living in poverty. An institution like the University of Pennsylvania and its alums are challenged to figure out solutions to problems that have not been solved. And solutions that are not just cherry picking the best and the brightest. That's wonderful. But our whole community has to move forward. And how does that happen? Institutional change, policy change, leadership change. We've heard about leadership at this session. And some of that is very uncomfortable. It doesn't make you feel good, because it says that you can't just help your own child. I read with interest the program from Penn, and forgive me, someone said, I speak my mind. It said legacies. Feels good to be a legacy, and your grandchild can be a legacy. Does it feel pretty good? Okay. The question is that the legacy you want? The question is, should the legacy of Penn be that it is reaching out everywhere to find more and more people who can be valued in this environment and who can value this environment beyond our own children? Civil rights laws changed a lot about whether you can have affirmative action in the acceptance of African Americans in particular in higher education. I lived through that era. The truth of the matter is, no one questions legacies. Are we going? You all stop breathing. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that. What I want to say, though, is that unless we talk about the things that are uncomfortable, we really haven't done much. Unless we talk about the things that are uncomfortable, we really won't have a legacy in 50 years that you can look back on. America needs leadership from people of color in particular that does not just take care of themselves. It needs a legacy of people of color who recognize that I didn't graduate. Let me tell you the Shirley Franklin story. I went to Howard University. I was happy to go. My mom said that I'd gotten a little too radical in school and that I needed to come back into the mainstream of black American life. So she wanted to send me to a historically black college, and I went to Howard University. I then came and went to Penn. Submitted an application, got accepted, was happy about that. My father thought it was a good idea. He had been accepted in the 1930s, couldn't afford to come, went back to Howard to get his professional degree. But he always loved what University of Pennsylvania stood for. So I came back and did my work here. But when I came, in my finals in those days, I had to take my finals for my master's degree, and there were 5 or 6 questions. This is 1969. And I decided, I read them, I answered 3. And then I turned my blue book in and it said, I can't answer the last 2. They said, why? I said, because they're racist and sexist and classist. And I refused to answer them. They said, what? I said, I'm not making a big fuss. If everybody else wants to answer them, that's fine. I don't have a protest. I'm not protesting. I'm not telling anybody else. I answered 3 of the 5 questions. That's a true story. I graduated. I must have gotten those 3 right. And I'm not recommending this for any students, you know. You got to be careful when you take a stand. But the point of the matter was that I had had an experience that I felt excluded me in the curriculum. And it excluded the conversation that I thought was relevant at the time. I was happy to be here, but I didn't think there was enough openness in the conversation. And there were other black students in my class who seemed to be okay with it, and I wasn't upset with them. Everybody's got to make their own stand. Everyone's got to make their own stand. So what I am suggesting, that as you pursue this Penn spectrum, that in future years you really tackle some of the issues that are not only Penn-centric, but that are American and global-centric. I don't know what they are for you, but I can tell you, Egbert already knows this. I saw the bookstore today, and I'm the sewer mayor in Atlanta. That's another story. But I spent a lot of political capital on fixing Atlanta's sewers. And I walked by the bookstore earlier today, and the provost has called this the year of water. Well, you know, for a sewer mayor, that's like manna from heaven. So they had 12 books. And I walked in and I said, I'd like to buy the books in the window. And they said, well, we don't think they're all organized. Which ones do you want? I said, I want them all. Water inequity. Environmental issues. My issue happens to be water. The question is, what is yours? How will you use this experience, this networking, in order to improve the lives of people you do not know and will never know? That is really the challenge. That's what it means to be an educated person. That's what it means to be a person of commitment. That's what it means to be a person concerned about the rest of the world. It doesn't mean that you just get better and better and better at what you do. It means that you bring along scads and scads of other folks who will never be able to say thank you. That's what it means. Now, the Penn spectrum has that potential because it's not an inward project. It's an outward and connecting project. But I would hope that in future years that we would see issues of poverty, issues of disenfranchisement, issues of human trafficking. These are not dinner time conversations. But I told you I was the sewer mayor, and any mayor who can talk about sewers at dinner can talk about human trafficking. 80 million, let me just tell you, in Georgia, 250 to 300 girls a month are trafficked. 250 to 300 girls from the ages of 12 to 15 are trafficked in Georgia. You don't read about that in the news, but those are the facts. They are our children. And if we don't break this cycle of oppression, of people of color, of people of difference, of people that don't seem to agree with us on anything, then America really will not be standing strong in 50 years. Penn may be standing, because it's been here so long. But America will not offer to our children the opportunities that it has offered to us. That is the challenge of this generation. Young people say to me, well, they didn't live during the civil rights movement. I said, I lived during it and I still didn't do anything about it. Start now, in your community, in your field. I want you to take care of your families. I want you to take care of your university. But I really want you to take care of those who are disenfranchised, those who are poor, those who are broken, those who are alienated, those who are scared, those who have never even dreamed of being in this unbelievable place called the University of Pennsylvania. And then I want you to challenge the University of Pennsylvania. You know, when I grew up 18 blocks from here, I thought Penn would be at my front door by now, because that was the plan. That was the plan. I'm not saying it's a bad plan. Maybe it's not a bad plan if the community is engaged and there's an opportunity for the community to be engaged in the growth and development of Penn. Maybe it isn't a bad plan, but it was a plan that everything from here to 52nd Street would be a part of the campus. Now that's fine if you just don't wipe all the folk on 52nd Street out. Now, that's just my view of the world, but that's not just true here. It's true of Columbia, University of Chicago. Let me just name them. Georgia Tech, Georgia State. I mean, it's not just Penn. But if we who have been left out don't keep the door open for people who did not have our opportunities, then the future rests on our shoulders. Just as we stand on the shoulders of those who come before. The question is, will our shoulders be strong enough and broad enough for anyone to stand on? That is the question. There are enough women in here that I know their shoulders are going to be strong. I don't mean that I don't like the men. I do like the men. I do, but I do like the women too. And sometimes you need people who've been locked out in order to understand what it means to keep the doors open. That is the challenge that you have in your work. Michael is a terrific mayor. When is your re-election? All right, we all ought to remember that. Now let me say that again. You all liked him when he came, you laughed, you applauded. Let me tell you something, politics in America is tough these days. Making these decisions is tough. Michael, if you don't hear from everybody in here, you call me. I'm going to be the one to send out the email. We need to be sure that we support people who are doing the public service and standing up, whether we agree with them or not on everything. We know that he operates he said he was in the club all the time, but we know he knew how to read and write too. The bottom line is, if we don't support him, and then we've got elections. Is everybody in here registered to vote? Let me just ask that question. Okay, and now, I come from a state where we may never see progressive leadership again. Not in my lifetime. At the statewide level. So all of you in states where there are close elections, I hope that you will vote. I don't mean that lightly. I am very proud, though I do not agree with everything that President Obama does. I don't have to agree with everything to support him. But if we don't give him some help in Washington, cities are going to go bankrupt. Poor people are going to it's going to be worse than the Depression. In part because we are a whole lot softer than the folk were going into the Depression. I urge you, I really wasn't planning to say this, but I urge you to exercise your democratic rights. You can vote for whomever you choose. I'm not making a proposal for who is right or which party. I have some interests, And I happen to believe in this crowd, I don't have to worry. You know? But I'm going to close on this. I just cut an ad in Atlanta. And I said, if we don't send the president some help, he is going to be defeated in his efforts to do things that people have asked him to do. Increasing the investment in education. Increasing America's reputation around the world. Understanding the value of education, STEM education, higher education. He's beginning finally to listen to people like Michael and talk about infrastructure. It took us a while, Michael, but he's finally getting there. He's now talking about bridges and water and things like that. I know that's dull and you don't want to hear about it. But let me tell you, there will be no industry if there's no clean water. There will be no jobs if there's no transportation, access to transit. You need to vote, and you need to go home and get everyone in your communities organized to vote. Maynard Jackson used to say that there were 3 principles that were the strength of the African American community. These are his words: the ballot, the book, and the Bible. Maynard Jackson said if you had all 3 of those going with you in Georgia, you can move Georgia up from the red clay to high ground. I am asking you to exercise the right of ballot. African Americans around the country are not turning out to vote, and with good reason. They're unemployed, they're scared, they don't think it matters. But if you are a Penn alum, you know differently. So I'm going to be watching. Michael's going to be watching. Now is the time. Use these coalitions that have been formed so that we can transform America for the 21st century. Thank you very much.